Elon Musk stood in the first-class line, dressed in a simple outfit that starkly contrasted with the surrounding luxury. A man nearby watched him with an air of superiority, his arrogance unmistakable. What happened next would leave everyone on that plane speechless and alter one life forever. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow, we have another special story just for you. Los Angeles International Airport was as chaotic as ever. Travelers rushing past, conversations overlapping, and luggage rolling in every direction. Amid the hustle and bustle, one man stood quietly in the first-class line, Elon Musk. He wore a plaid shirt, faded jeans, and scuffed boots. A well-worn backpack rested on his shoulder, looking like it had accompanied him on countless journeys. There was nothing flashy about him, which made him easy to overlook. Yet, anyone who took a closer look would sense something unique about him. It wasn't just his appearance, it was the quiet confidence he exuded. Unlike the restless passengers around him, Elon remained calm, fully present in the moment. The contrast between him and the other first-class travelers was striking, yet he didn't seem to mind the glances. Just behind him stood Richard Collins, his complete opposite. Richard was dressed in an expensive tailored suit, his polished shoes gleaming under the airport lights. A strong cologne announced his presence before he even spoke. Every movement he made was calculated, as if he wanted the world to acknowledge his importance. Richard's eyes scanned the line until they landed on Elon. His lips curled into a smirk. "First class, huh?" he remarked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "You never know who might show up in these lines these days." Elon turned his head slightly, his expression unchanged. "Yeah, the world is full of surprises." Richard frowned, clearly expecting a stronger reaction. He wanted confirmation of his assumptions about the man in front of him. But Elon remained unbothered, his calm demeanor unshaken. Richard wasn't done. "Nothing personal, but you don't seem like the type who flies first class," he said, chuckling. "It's rare to see someone so casual up here." The boarding process began, and the first-class passengers moved forward. Elon and Richard, without another word, proceeded toward the plane. Richard strutted with the confidence of someone who felt entitled to his seat. Elon, meanwhile, walked at the same relaxed pace as before, unfazed by the world around him. But when they reached their seats, something unexpected happened. Richard glanced at his ticket once more, then looked up, only to see Elon settling into the seat right next to his. "You've got to be kidding me," Richard muttered, shaking his head. With an amused scoff, he dropped into his seat. Out of all the places on this plane, it had to be here. Elon met his gaze with a small, polite smile. "Looks like we're traveling together." Richard crossed his arms, trying to suppress his discomfort. It wasn't just the fact that he was sitting beside Elon. It was the realization that the man he had just judged so harshly was sharing the same exclusive space. As the last economy passengers boarded, Richard decided to continue the conversation, though not in a friendly way. "So, what do you do for a living?" he asked casually, as if already knowing the answer. Elon, who was adjusting his backpack under the seat, looked up. "I work in technology." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I see. Startups? Small projects?" Elon gave a slight smile. "Something like that." Richard chuckled. "It's interesting how people find their way into places like this. But, you know, first class isn't for everyone." Elon glanced at him, assessing the comment, but remained composed. "I believe we all end up exactly where we need to be." Richard let out a short laugh. "That's nice. Kind of philosophical." But real life isn't that simple. Elon didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned to look out the window, as if the conversation was over. But Richard wasn't ready to let it go. "You might be sitting here, but some places don't really belong to everyone," he added, leaning in slightly. Elon met his gaze, his expression unchanged. The silence that followed spoke louder than words. Richard leaned back, a satisfied smile creeping onto his face. He thought he had won the exchange, but he had no idea that this was only the beginning. As the flight took off, the in-flight service began. The flight attendant moved through first class, offering drinks. Richard made sure to be noticed. "A glass of champagne," he said with a confident smirk. "Something that matches the exclusivity of this seat." The flight attendant, accustomed to passengers like him, nodded with a professional smile. When it was Elon's turn, he made a simple request. "Just water, please." Richard chuckled, shaking his head. "Water?" he repeated, barely holding back his laughter. "You're in first class, and you're drinking water?" Elon accepted the bottle and replied calmly, "Sometimes simplicity is enough." Richard narrowed his eyes, as if trying to decode Elon's words. Then he scoffed. "I suppose that works for people who settle for less. Not everyone is meant to enjoy the best life has to offer." Elon took a small sip of his water, unbothered. Other passengers began to notice Richard's tone, but since Elon remained composed, no one intervened. "Maybe the best is different for everyone," Elon finally said. Richard's smirk faltered. He took a deep breath, trying to maintain control of the conversation. "Or maybe people say that because they never had access to what really matters." The flight attendant, serving another passenger nearby, cast a subtle glance at them. She seemed to consider stepping in, but she noticed that Elon was handling the situation just fine. Elon merely gave a slight smile and turned his attention back to the window. Richard, on the other hand, wasn't satisfied. He wanted to provoke a reaction, but he was beginning to realize that Elon was not an easy opponent to rattle. Richard thought he was dominating the exchange, but the other passengers saw things differently. His arrogance was becoming uncomfortable, while Elon's quiet composure carried an unshakable strength. What happened next would make Richard question everything he believed about status, power, and respect.